The gray fog of London has a way of swallowing secrets, but it can never drown out the rhythmic ticking of a debt that has been waiting over a century to be settled. In the heart of Kensington, behind the towering iron gates of Stirling Manor, Sarah moved with the invisible precision of a woman who had spent 30 years serving a ghost. She was a quiet caregiver, the only person allowed into the inner sanctum of Lord Alastair Thorne, a man whose name was whispered in the corridors of power, but whose face had not been seen in public since the late 90s. Sarah had held his hand through the darkest nights of his illness, prepared every meal with meticulous care, and endured the sneers of his arrogant nephews, the Stirling heirs, who viewed her as nothing more than a glorified servant. She lived in a small wood-paneled room in the servants' wing, unaware that the antique silver pocket watch she used to track Alastair's medication was a chronological trigger to a $3 billion Thorne legacy hidden within the manor's very foundations. The Stirling nephews were the architects of arrogance, men who had built their reputations on the assumed inheritance of the Thorne fortune. They spent their days in the exclusive clubs of Mayfair, borrowing against a future they did not own, convinced that Alastair's passing would finally grant them control of the $3 billion Kensington estate. They treated Sarah with a calculated social injustice, frequently reminding her that her service would end the moment the old man drew his last breath. They assumed the Thorne bloodline had grown thin and weak, never imagining that Alastair had spent 3 decades observing Sarah's radical loyalty as a form of moral vetting. The Unshakeable fate was a slow-burning fuse, coiled within the manor's original 1905 blueprints, waiting for the moment when the quiet caregiver would finally hold the key to the empire. The financial topic of the Thorne Stirling Trust was a source of intense speculation in the City of London, as the $3 billion portfolio included some of the most valuable commercial real estate in the UK. But the trust was operationally locked. A specific clause in the 1905 charter, written by Isabella Thorne herself, stated that the estate could only be transferred to a person who possessed the frequency of the faithful. The Stirling heirs had hired the best lawyers in London to bypass the clause, but every legal attempt was met with a systemic rejection from the Thorne sovereign network. The unmasking was a mathematical certainty. Without the moral signature that Sarah unknowingly carried, the $3 billion was a frozen asset, and the Stirling family was on the brink of a total reputational collapse. Sarah, sitting by Alastair's bed during a heavy thunderstorm, noticed that the silver watch in her hand began to vibrate with a soft, golden warmth that matched the rhythm of her own heart. The catalyst for the Unshakeable justice arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 hours after Lord Alastair Thorne peacefully passed away. As the Stirling nephews gathered in the Grand Library, ready to serve Sarah with an immediate eviction notice, the manor's central grandfather clock, a masterpiece of 1905 engineering, suddenly stopped. In the silence that followed, a hidden panel in the library wall slid open, revealing a high-tech biometric scanner that had been dormant for a century. The heirs tried to activate it with their signatures, but the system emitted a harsh red light of dishonest frequency. Driven by a quiet strength, Sarah stepped forward. As she placed her hand on the scanner, the silver watch in her pocket synchronized with the manor's core. The amazing turnaround was official. The quiet caregiver was recognized as the sovereign administrator, and the $3 billion estate began its total reclamation of the Thorne legacy. The shock that paralyzed the Stirling heirs in the Kensington Library was a moment of absolute financial terror. As the Thorne sovereign network recognized Sarah, every digital lock in the manor turned from red to gold, and the $3 billion asset portfolio was instantly transferred to her private Thorne account. The unmasking was absolute. A holographic projection of Lord Alastair Thorne filled the room, his voice echoing with the authority of a man who had finally found a worthy successor. He revealed that Sarah was not just a caregiver, but the granddaughter of the very nurse who had saved Isabella Thorne's life in 1918. This was the ultimate social injustice corrected. The woman they had treated as a servant was the rightful guardian of the Thorne's London empire. The financial topic shifted from inheritance to moral reparations, as Sarah realized that her 30 years of quiet service had been the longest job interview in history. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The fall of the Stirling nephews was a spectacle of divine payback that left the London elite in a state of psychological collapse. As the Thorne Sentinel began to audit their personal accounts, it was revealed that they had been siphoning funds from the estate for decades to pay off gambling debts in Macau. This was the internal betrayal that Alistair had long suspected. Sarah, however, did not use her new $3 billion power for revenge. She utilized a legacy to establish the Kensington Caregivers Guild, a non-profit organization that provided high-end housing and professional recognition for the city's domestic workers. The amazing turnaround was a total reclamation of the city's moral compass. The quiet caregiver had become the sovereign of London, proving that the most powerful person in the house is often the one who says the least. To understand the unshakable fate of the London estate, the narrative must travel back to the winter of 1905, inside a fog-shrouded office in Whitehall. Isabella Thorne had met with the original architect of the Kensington Manor, a man who shared her vision of architectural integrity. She knew that the fake heirs of the future would try to steal the Thornes' physical assets, so she had worked with the master locksmith of the era to build a biological lock into the mansion's iron frame. She had hidden the master deeds within the silver pocket watch, knowing that only someone who treated the watch and the legacy it represented with radical care would ever be able to unlock the fortune. She was investing in the long fate, ensuring that the $3 billion estate would eventually return to a soul that understood the value of a single human life. The social injustice Isabella had witnessed in the factories of Manchester was a catalyst for the justice Sarah was now delivering in London. The reclamation of the Kensington estate reached its final, industrial stage with the activation of the Thorne London Integrity Net. Utilizing the $3 billion legacy, Sarah oversaw the modernization of the manor into a social sovereignty hub, a place where the history of the Thorne betrayal and the miracle of the reclamation were documented for the world to see. The shipping and logistics topic was now a matter of sovereign transparency, as the Thorne London network linked up with the global hubs in Milan, Shanghai, Barcelona, Munich, Seoul, Brussels, Athens, Cape Town, Stockholm, and Buenos Aires. The amazing turnaround was a finished tapestry of justice. Sarah stood on the balcony of the manor, looking out over the London skyline, and felt the presence of Lord Alistair in the silent air. The 120-year-old debt was paid, the karma was served, and the quiet caregiver had finally, eternally, found her port. The unstoppable fate of the Thorne family was a golden light that would never be extinguished, a story of a woman who became a queen by simply staying at the bedside of the truth. If you're enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The psychological unmasking of the Sterling heirs reached its final conclusion in the silence of their separate legal hearings. They were forced to confront the reality that they had lost everything, not because of a clever lawyer, but because of their own inability to recognize the sovereign soul of the woman who had served them. The inevitable karma was a total, internal collapse. They spent their final days in shadows of the city they once thought they owned, while Sarah's name became a symbol of the new aristocracy of integrity. The unmasking was absolute, and as the Thorne flag flew over Kensington, the world realized that the most powerful thing a person can own is an honest heart. The $3 billion legacy was finally, justly, in the hands of the woman who knew that the true value of an estate is measured by the quality of the care provided within its walls. The story was finished, and the justice was eternal. The legal siege of Stirling Manor did not take place in the wood-paneled courtrooms of the Royal Courts of Justice, but within the encrypted servers of the Whitehall Sovereign Audit, a system Isabella Thorne had helped design during her secret residency in London in 1922. The Sterling nephews, desperate to reclaim the $3 billion estate, hired the Grey Eminence, a shadow legal firm known for dismantling ancient trusts through technicalities and character assassination. They launched a campaign of social injustice against Sarah, planning false stories in the London tabloids that she had manipulated the elderly Lord Alistair in his final moments. But the unshakable fate of the Thorne legacy was protected by the London Fog Protocol. As the shadow lawyers attempted to access the manor's private records, the antique silver pocket watch Sarah Carey began to emit a high-frequency digital pulse. This was the integrity firewall of the Thorne bloodline. Every piece of forged evidence the Sterling family presented was instantaneously cross-referenced with the 1905 original deeds, which were stored in a molecular-level archive within the manor's granite foundations. The unmasking was visceral. The Gray Eminence found their own servers wiped clean, replaced by the Thorne ledger in 1922, revealing a century of the law firm's own illegal activities. The financial topic of this digital purge was a total valuation reset for the Sterling family's remaining assets. As their reputation crumbled, the banks in the City of London began to call in the massive debts the nephews had accrued. The amazing turnaround was a physical and psychological unmasking of the Mayfair elite. Sarah, standing in the manor's grand hallway, didn't need a lawyer. She had the truth of the clock. The $3 billion estate was not just a collection of bricks and mortar, but a living node in the Thorne sovereign network. The unmasking revealed that the Sterling nephews had been planning to sell the manor to a foreign conglomerate that intended to turn the historic site into a luxury casino. The social injustice of destroying a piece of London's heritage for infinite greed was halted by the quiet Caregiver. Sarah utilized the Thorne reserves to activate the Kensington Preservation Shield, a legal and financial barrier that ensured Sterling Manor would forever remain a sanctuary for the city's history and its most vulnerable citizens. If you're enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The narrative back and forth takes us to a rainy evening in November 1922 inside a secret cellar in Bloomsbury. Isabella Thorne met with a group of nautical architects and caregiver guilds, handing them the blueprints for what would become the Thorne London Integrity Net. She knew that the fake aristocracy would eventually try to seize the city's vital infrastructure, so she had worked with the local craftspeople to build karmic locks into the city's early electrical and telegraph systems. She was investing in a long fate, placing the $3 billion fortune not in the bank, but in the very fabric of the city's growth. She understood that the quiet caregiver, the one who watches while others sleep, would be the only one capable of wielding such power without being corrupted by it. The social injustice Isabella had witnessed in the crowded infirmaries of East London was a blueprint for the justice Sarah was now delivering. The 104-year-old journey was reaching its most critical junction in the heart of the British Empire. The psychological unmasking of the Sterling nephews reached its peak during the Mayfair confrontation. In a final, arrogant attempt to intimidate Sarah, the brothers cornered her in a private garden, offering her a settlement of silence, a few $1,000,000 to disappear and never mention the Thorne name again. But Sarah, whose character had been tempered by 30 years of patience, simply held up the silver pocket watch. As the watch struck the hour, it emitted a localized acoustic truth frequency, a technology Isabella had developed to bypass human deception. As the nephews spoke their threats, their own voices were amplified and broadcasted to the garden speakers, but with a horrifying karmic filter. The speakers didn't play their words, but the financial intent behind them. Every mention of settlement was heard as theft, and every mention of agreement was heard as betrayal. The unmasking was visceral and public, as members of the city's high society watched from the surrounding balconies. The Sterling brothers, stripped of their fake authority, fled the garden in a state of total reputational disintegration. The amazing turnaround was not just a victory for Sarah, but a total value migration for the London real estate market. As word spread that the $3 billion Sterling Manor was now the headquarters of the Global Caregivers Trust, the surrounding properties in Kensington saw a moral valuation spike. Investors realized that the most stable asset in a world of chaos is verified integrity. Sarah utilized the $3 billion legacy to launch the Thorne London Hospital Initiative, providing the city's underfunded wards with the advanced medical technology Alistair had spent his life developing. This was the biological redemption of the Thorne legacy. The shipping and logistics topic was now about connecting the compassion, as the Thorne London network began to synchronize with the hubs in Milan and Shanghai to provide global medical relief. The quiet caregiver had moved from the shadows of the sick room to the center of a global revolution, proving that the hand that holds the medicine is a hand that can heal a nation. If you're enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The final resolution of the Kensington Gold was an architectural masterpiece of social alchemy. Sarah authorized the construction of the Alistair Memorial Wing, a facility built into the manor's gardens that utilized the kinetic energy of the nearby London Underground to power free healthcare for the elderly. The shipping and logistics of the Thorne Empire were now a circle of radical loyalty, where every pound spent was tracked by the Thorne Sentinel to ensure zero corruption. The amazing turnaround was a finished tapestry of justice. Sarah sat in Alistair's old study, surrounded by the leather-bound books of the Thorne archive, and realized that her 30 years of silence had been the loudest statement of all. The 120-year-old journey was over, and the truth was finally, beautifully, at home in London. The unshakable fate of the Thorne family was a golden light that would never be extinguished, a story of a caregiver who became a queen by simply refusing to let the light of an honest man go out. The unmasking of the London Shadow Board director, a man who had operated from the heights of a Canary Wharf skyscraper for 40 years, was the final terrifying karma of the London saga. As Sarah activated the sovereign audit, the Thorne Sentinel traced a direct line of financial treachery from the director's private accounts to the 1905 sabotage of David Thorne's London shipping interests. The unmasking was visceral. As the director sat in a board meeting, every screen in the room began to display the Thorne Ledger of 1905, highlighting his ancestors' role in the original betrayal. The financial topic was a total asset evaporation, as the international markets recognized the illegitimacy of the board. The amazing turnaround was a total victory for the Thorne bloodline. The quiet caregiver had used her $3 billion legacy to buy back the very debt that had once nearly destroyed her family's name. The social injustice of the invisible worker was finally addressed on a global scale. Sarah utilized the Thorne Sovereign Network to establish the Isabella Protocol for Domestic Integrity, a global set of labor standards that ensured every caregiver, nurse, and domestic worker was recognized as a sovereign professional. The amazing turnaround was a cultural revolution. The London elite were forced to realize that the people they ignored were the very people who held the keys to their futures. The shipping and logistics topic shifted to the logistics of life, as the Thorne London network became the primary provider of ethical energy and healthcare technology for the Commonwealth. Sarah stood on the steps of Stirling Manor, watching as the Thorne flag was raised for the first time in a century, a simple woman who had changed the world by never losing her soul. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The true genius of Stirling Manor lay not in its Victorian facade, but in its subterranean relationship with the London Clockwork Network. Beneath the wine cellar, protected by layers of lead and reinforced concrete, sat the Thorne Stirling Regulator, a massive brass-geared analytical engine that synchronized with the silver watch Sarah had carried for 3 decades. This engine was the physical heart of Alistair's $3 billion empire, controlling the automated trading algorithms and property management systems that maintained the Thorne family's dominance in the city. As Sarah stood before the regulator, the silver watch emitted a final, resonant chime that unlocked the engine's core. The amazing turnaround was a total physical manifestation of the Isabella Protocol. The unmasking revealed that the Stirling nephews had been attempting to manually override the engine for years, using hacked codes and black market software, which had only served to trigger the manor's defensive entropy. The financial topic was a masterclass in karmic encryption. The regulator was programmed to slowly degrade the assets of anyone who approached it with a frequency of deception, explaining why the Stirling's own investments had been failing, while Alistair's grew under Sarah's quiet presence. The social injustice of the wealth gap in London was Sarah's primary target for the $3 billion legacy. She utilized the regulator's processing power to launch the Sovereign Housing Initiative, a project that converted derelict Thorne-owned warehouses in East London into high-tech, sustainable living spaces for the city's essential workers. This wasn't charity. It was a systemic correction. Sarah understood that the city functioned on the backs of caregivers, cleaners, and transport workers, the invisible sovereigns. The shipping and logistics topic was transformed as the Thorne London network deployed a fleet of autonomous, zero-emission delivery pods to provide fresh food and medicine to these new communities, bypassing the expensive and corrupt supply chains of the old guard. The amazing turnaround was a total democratization of the Thorne wealth. The quiet caregiver had turned a $3 billion fortune into a tool of urban healing, proving that the best guardian of the city's future is the one who has spent their life caring for its people. Image of a brass gear mechanism. The inevitable karma for the Shadow Board's European director, a man known only as the Auditor, arrived during the Kensington public inquiry. Desperate to stop Sarah from dismantling the old financial order, he attempted to use a sovereign debt lever to bankrupt the Thorne London Trust. But Sarah, seated at the head of the inquiry table, simply placed a silver watch on the desk. The watch didn't just tell time. It acted as a historical projector. As the auditor began his legal assault, the watch projected the ledger of 1905 onto the walls of the chamber, revealing that the auditor's own family had been built on a $500 million theft from Isabella Thorne's original London Reconstruction Fund. The unmasking was visceral and immediate. The auditor's fake authority evaporated as the international maritime and banking registries automatically recognized the debt. The financial topic was a total karmic foreclosure. In a single afternoon, the Shadow Board's London interests were liquidated to pay for the very social program Sarah was building. If you're enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories, and activate the notification bell. The amazing turnaround was a total global victory for the Thorne bloodline. As the news of the London reclamation spread, the other 9 Thorne heirs, from Milan to Buenos Aires, synchronized their sovereign networks with Sarah's new London hub. The circle of integrity was now a globe of truth. The social injustice of the hidden elites was a thing of the past, as the Thorne Sentinel made every financial transaction of the Shadow Board visible to the public. Sarah, who had once been ignored by the Sterling nephews as she cleaned their rooms, was now the strategic anchor of a new world economy. The unmasking of the board's empty genius was complete. They had relied on complex lies, while Isabella Thorne had relied on the simple, unshakable truth of a devoted heart. The inevitable karma had finished its work in London, and the city was finally, eternally, home to the Thorne legacy. The final confrontation between Sarah and the remaining Sterling brothers took place in the vault of silence beneath Sterling Manor. The nephews, in a last act of infinite greed, had attempted to steal the original Thorne signet ring, the physical key to the family's global gold reserves. But the vault was not a place of safety for the dishonest. Isabella Thorne had designed it to be a psychological filter. As the brothers entered, the vault's acoustic tiles began to vibrate with the frequency of the neglected. They were forced to hear the 30 years of Sarah's quiet footsteps, the sound of Alistair's labored breathing, and the echoes of their own arrogant laughter. The unmasking was visceral. The brothers suffered a total psychological collapse as they were forced to confront the vacuum of their own character. They were found by the Thorne Sentinel, huddled in the corner of the vault, their fake status stripped away by the very person they had once despised. Sarah utilized a $3 billion legacy to establish the Alistair Thorne University of Integrity, a school dedicated to teaching the next generation of world leaders that loyalty is the highest currency. The shipping and logistics topic was now about the logistics of character, where every graduate was vetted by the Thorne Sovereign Network to ensure they could never be bought or corrupted. The amazing turnaround was absolute. The quiet caregiver had replaced the arrogant heirs with a new generation of sovereign servants. The social injustice of the old educational systems, which prioritized profit over ethics, was dismantled. Sarah stood in the center of the university's quad, a simple woman who had moved from the sickroom to the world stage and realized that her 30 years of silence had been the necessary preparation for this moment of total global leadership. The final resolution of the London estate was a masterpiece of emotional and industrial healing. Sarah visited the small, quiet chapel on the grounds of Sterling Manor, where Lord Alistair had been laid to rest beside the memory of Isabella Thorne. She didn't bring a trophy or a check for $3 billion. She brought the silver pocket watch, its golden gears now perfectly synchronized with the heartbeat of the city. She laid the watch on the stone, where it emitted a final soft blue light that signaled the completion of the London reclamation. "The house is honest now, Alistair," she whispered. "The name is back on the gates." The silence of the chapel was filled with a distant, rhythmic hum of the Thorne London energy grid, a sound that felt like the pulse of a world that had finally found its moral compass. The 120-year-old journey was over, and the truth was finally, beautifully at home. The unstoppable fate of the Thorne family was a finished tapestry, and the final thread in London was as strong as British iron and as pure as Sarah's heart. The $3 billion legacy was not a burden of wealth, but a promise of protection for those who serve in the shadows. The amazing turnaround was a total victory. The quiet caregiver remained the guardian of the manor, her hand still moving with the same humble grace as when she administered Alistair's medicine. The unmasking of the old world was complete, and the new world was guided by the Isabella Protocol. London was a city of the truth, and its justice was eternal. The story of the quiet caregiver was a masterpiece of unshakable fate, proving that no matter how long the shadows last, the light and honest soul will always find its way to the throne. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell.